one more teller. We have Carla, beer blogger and the beer babe.
Can you put this down just a tad for me? I'm a little bit shorter. Great. Okay. All right, so Carla, I got this great beer. You gotta try this. I've heard this phrase probably hundreds of times. I'm a beer writer. I've been writing about beer since about 2007. People love to share the beer that they have with me. I usually react with outright enthusiasm. Okay, awesome. What is it? Tell me all about it. 99% of the time, that's my reaction. This story is not about 99% of that time. This story is about when I heard those words out of the mouth of my father. Now, my dad, if I can introduce him, his name is Tony. He's an Italian-American. He looks exactly like Tony Soprano, and that's his nickname. He worked in his entire life in the New York State government doing things involving criminals. He was in parole, he was in probation, things with the corrections department, and basically dealt with anybody that he nicknamed scumbags. So, growing up, I learned a lot of life lessons from my dad about how to be street smart and how not to leave my drink anywhere because someone might put something in it and take advantage of me. Or how not to drive not to let any boys drive me home because they might take advantage of me. He didn't know that I was the one driving them home, but it's irrelevant. So, he's this red-blooded American Republican Rush Limbaugh guy. Bud Light, Budweiser, plain old beer his entire life. So when my brother and I show up at his place for our once-a-year visit to his little bachelor pad, for this little holiday we do in between Christmas and Thanksgiving because my parents are divorced and my brother and I feel guilty and have to go visit my dad at least once a year. And he comes to me and the first thing that he says is, I got this great new beer, you gotta try it. I'm a little suspicious. I'm also a little scared because I had started this blog and I called it The Beer Babe. I thought it would be anonymous, whatever. And he had always told me growing up, don't ever put any personal information about yourself on the internet. Don't drink, in excess. Don't hang out with a lot of guys, all this stuff. So I did not choose to share the fact that I have been this beer writer for several years up to that point. And I was petrified that he was doing this because he had found out. So I managed to utter something like, oh? And he walks over to the fridge like it's a commercial, and he opens the fridge, and it's filled head to tail with Bud Light Lime. Okay? Now, this is December, all right? So I am a beer geek. Normally, I'm not a beer snob, but there's no way in hell I am eating turkey and mashed potatoes and fake lime-flavored beer. I'm sorry, I can't, okay? So while my dad and my brother are getting the dinner ready, I steal my brother's Jeep, and I go around the corner, and I pick up just a six-pack of Harpoon Winter Warmer. It's like your typical winter beer. It's got some spices in it. It's malty, whatever. It goes a lot better with turkey than lime. So we have this dinner. I'm sitting there drinking a Harpoon Winter Warmer. My dad goes, what are you drinking? So I push it across the table to him, and he takes a sip, and he makes this face. The not bad face. And I'm like, all right. And he goes, so what's different about that than Budweiser? So I give him a really short lecture on the difference between an ale and a lager and how flavors, they kind of change through the seasons, and maybe it's not a great idea to have lime in the middle of winter, and there's this big spectrum of beer flavors. The mini talk that I give, much longer, much more enthusiastic people all the time. So we get through this dinner, we get through the visit, don't talk much more about it. I kind of forget about it until the following year. So same thing, my brother and I descend upon my dad in his little apartment, and he goes, Carla, I got this great new beer. You gotta try it. I'm like, What could this possibly be? Bud Light Lime-A-Rita? Watermelon flavored beer? I don't know. And at this point, I'm still also petrified that he might have found out that I'm some beer expert and he's gonna yell at me about, putting all this sensitive information on the internet. So he goes, it's called Ommegang Rare Voss? Now, to people who don't know, the Ommegang Brewery is a Belgian-style brewery in upstate New York that makes these, fancy beers. They're yeast-forward. They've got all these spices in them. It's ridiculous. This is like your roommate who, eats a can of Cheese Whiz every week, suddenly telling you about this great cave-aged blue cheese, All right? So I am just, at this point, I'm just like, what? And he says, oh yeah, well, when you gave me that harpoon, you know, it kind of gave me a little bit of, you know, I tried some stuff. And I'm like, you what? So my dad's a bachelor, and he goes out to bars a lot, and because he's in Albany, New York, which is actually not very far from this brewery, this Omegang brewery is actually on tap all over town, and he saw it, and he wrote down the name of it, and he Googled it, and he found my blog. So he tells me that he's been reading my blog for the past year, and I'm waiting, like I'm wincing for this to come. And he goes, and it's awesome. I'm like, okay. He has been telling everyone he knows in town in Albany, I find out as we go out later, that his daughter's the beer babe. And I'm like, oh my God. So essentially, before this time, you know, my parents got divorced when I was in high school. We had this really crappy relationship. We never really got to know each other as adults. And this was the first time that we actually talked to each other as if we were meeting each other, right? Oh, you're interested in beer. Tell me more about that. So we had this great visit. It was awesome. I kind of packed back up, went back to Maine. And a couple weeks later, I got a text message from my dad, who had figured out how to do this on his BlackBerry. And he says, I'm at this bar, and they've got this beer. Do you think I will like it? And I wrote him back, and I said, well, actually, that one has a lot of hops in it. You probably won't like that one. Go try this. And he did, and he said, thanks, that was really cool. And that was actually one of the first just kind of spontaneous conversations we'd had in years. And that's my story of how a fridge full of terrible, terrible beer got me and my dad to have a relationship again. So.